G'day, ZiggyD here, and today I want to talk about all things cluster jewels in Path of Exile. I really like the cluster jewels system. It's a ton of fun to play with, they're a ton of fun to craft. They're actually quite easy to craft as well, and in this video I want to just go over everything from like crafting, trading, how they work mechanically, and how to use them, and things like that. So let's just start with how do they work, how do you use them. You can use them in any of these sockets that are on the outside of the tree. They look like this, they look like fancy different shape jewel sockets, and you can place cluster jewels in those. Now, it goes in size order, so jewels go in large, medium, and small size, looking like that. And you can place in these outer sockets any of these sizes, so you can go straight to small if you want, or you can do a medium, or you can do a large. But then when you have a socket and you have another jewel on the cluster jewel there, like this one here, you can only go down. So this is a medium jewel socket, and this is a small jewel socket. So you can go from large to small, or large to medium, and then you can go from medium to small. You can't put another large off of a large. Otherwise, you'd be able to get infinite chaining of these and make your own entire skill tree, which would be really cool, but very busted because these end up being very point efficient and have some very powerful effects on them. Just in a general sense, every build is probably going to want one of these, at least one cluster jewel slot to take advantage of, whether it's just to get a medium with a nice notable like grand design for an additional brand, or whether it's to make a really nice chain of several cluster jewels. So just plan your builds accordingly, because everyone's going to want at least one of these, I think. There's something for pretty much everyone in that massive notable list of 280 notables. So definitely take advantage of that. Another thing to note is you can use regular jewels in these sockets as well. It's easy to miss that, but you can put regular jewels in here and take advantage of those fully. And that can be very efficient as well, because you can get like a large jewel cluster like this and get 2 jewel sockets and put 2 regular jewels in there. And that ends up being very nice when you also have like 3 notables and 2 jewel sockets. That's a lot of juice on one large cluster. So those can be very valuable. So definitely take advantage of that as well. It looks a little something like this when you socket a small jewel in there. It basically just extends out and adds that additional cluster. You can also refund these as well. You need to take out any extra attached jewels and you just take it out and it'll refund all of the points. It does cost 1 point here, and maybe it's because of one of these expenditures. I'm not quite sure why it's costing 1 point, but some of the points like these ones here spent are free. So it just cost me 1 point to refund that one, and then I can replace it and get it back and put another jewel in there, or craft the jewel and change it, and all of that sort of shenanigans. So the cluster jewels drop with an enchant. That's that light blue text up the top there that determines what type of cluster jewel is and how many passives it has. So large cluster jewels can have between 8 and 12 passives, mediums between 4 and 6, and smalls between 2 and 3. Now, about this number of passives thing, in most cases, large clusters, you probably want smaller number of passives because it means you need to spend less points to get the notables, so it becomes more point efficient. Because these are fine, but they're not super amazing, right? You want the notables without spending too many passives. So for example, I'm using an 8 passive jewel here. If this was a 12 passive jewel, then we'd potentially have to spend a lot more points to get to those notables. You can see if you count this, how it's 8 passives. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the small ones are effectively replaced by the notables and the jewel sockets. So it just becomes really point efficient when you have a smaller number of these. There will be some exceptions, things like maybe curse effect on medium clusters. If you want as much curse effect as possible, you might want to go for more passives, so you can get more of that curse effect. And the same might go for small clusters that have things like life or mana, if you want to get as much as possible of that. Especially small clusters, you might want 3 rather than 2 passives, because you get a lot of modifiers to those small nodes. So in this case, we have like +3 life and +4 fire res. Most small cluster jewels, you'll see something like, well, pretty much every small cluster jewel that has 4 mods will have 1 notable and then 3 modifiers to enhance those small modifiers. So in that case, you're much better off with something more because, right, say you want to say this is a life node, you probably want as much life as possible from your small cluster jewel, right? Because you're spending a point to get that in the first place to socket it here. So if you have 3 nodes, you're going to get the life, the extra resists, the extra percentage life, and so on the other 2 nodes, and then also the notable. So you're going to want that as much as possible. So I reckon in a lot of cases, 3 small passive jewels will be better than 2 small passive jewels. But, you know, decide based on your build and what you're looking for and how many points you want to spend, obviously. Maybe you just want to go for the notable and spend 1 less point to do it. Now, where do you get these? These cluster jewels start dropping around level 45, so if you're leveling and you haven't seen any yet, they'll just start dropping randomly off Delirium monsters that you kill in the fog. Around level 45, you'll start to see them. I didn't really see any smalls and mediums until I got to maps, but it's possible they drop then, but at least you'll start seeing some larges from 45 onwards. There is a little bit of an item level thing going on with these. From what I can tell, all of the notables, so these larger nodes, like Supercharge, for example, here, don't have item level restrictions, so any level of jewel can roll any of these. However, if we take a look at PoEDB, there's been some data mining here, and you can see that the smaller modifiers, so this is like small passive skills grant additional flat life, this indeed does have different modifier item levels. So from 1 onwards, you get 2 to 3 life, and then at level 84, so from your highest level jewels, you can get 14 to 16 extra flat life, which is obviously a big difference. So high item levels are better, especially for small jewels, because you're going to be getting a lot of these sorts of things. So these flat added modifiers are going to be much more impactful, especially for this one here, item level 84, 35% increased effect. So if you got this on a life jewel, it's going to scale that percentage life even further. So that one can be rather important as well. But as I said, the notables don't seem to have item levels. They do have weighting though, so some of the notables are rarer than others. The lower the number here, the more rare this is going to be. So this like maximum life as extra armor is really good, and it's also really rare because it has the lower weighting. Whereas like peak vigor, which is 1111 rating, is just a life recovery from flasks, which is not quite as, impactful on a life jewel. So that one's much more common. So you will see the best ones less often. You got like the biggest life node, the 10% with 20 flat life is like 139 weighting. So like one of the rarest there. The other important item level to take note of, I can't remember where I found this, but the 2 jewel sockets on large cluster jewels. So large cluster jewels can roll 1 or 2 sockets, mediums can roll 1 socket, and smalls cannot roll any additional sockets because that's the end of the chain effectively. Now, you'll notice I only have 1 socket here. This jewel is not high enough item level to roll it. It's like item level 68. The item level for 2 sockets, so if you want to make a large cluster jewel that has like 3 notables and 2 sockets, is item level 75. So you'll want to try and get item level 75s. And if you search on PoE Trade, you'll notice they're a lot more expensive. And that's for that reason, because you can get not only better other modifiers in some cases, but mostly for the double jewel sockets. Because that's very effective. Even if you just go for the large, you're not planning on chaining off it, because you could chain 2 mediums off it, right? Which is pretty crazy. But you could also just put 2 regular jewels in there, which is potentially, another 14% life plus 6 extra damage mods. So pretty impactful. So item level 75 for the 2 jewels on the large cluster jewels. Now searching for jewels on the official trade site is really easy. You can type in added small passives grant, and then this will search the enchant. So the blue text, which determines the type of the jewel. So we've got things like chaos res, lightning res, mana, damage with brands, and damage with hits and ailments and stuff like that with staff skills. You can search for that in here, and it's actually really easy because the official trade site supports a drop-down box for this. So if we want to find like any particular one for your build, say you're playing like a fire damage build, we can just type fire in here, and we can say maybe we're playing a fire damage over time build, or we're playing a generic fire build or something like that. We can search for that, and then we can hit search, and that's a really easy way to find those. You can also type in your specific item level down over here if you want to put in a specific item level. If you want to try and go for the 75 ones, this is a medium cluster jewel, so it's not quite as important. But if you want to look for those, you can type in 75 there, or whatever other item level is important for you. And then you can just have a browse of jewels. That's fine. You can also determine, let's say I want to find large cluster jewels. So let's go for the generic fire one, which is I'm pretty sure is a large cluster jewel. Yeah, the large cluster jewel. We can go for maximum number of passives. We want to make a smallest amount of passives spent one. We want to make a really good large cluster jewel. So we can type in adds like this hash pound symbol passive skills. So if you just type like passive skills in here, you can probably just find it in the list, or you can go adds number passive skills and then just type this one. It's an enchant, so make sure you select the enchant. And then the maximum of 8. And then we'll only find the large cluster jewels that have 8 passives, so you can cut down on the amount of passives you have to spend a lot, which is really good for those large cluster jewels. And then you can also search specific notables. So you can do this by going to PoEDB. I'll put these links in the description for you. But you can go to PoEDB, and we can say find, we're on a small cluster jewel here. We can go cluster jewels on the left side. And we can find the fire damage one. So we can click on the fire damage one here, large cluster jewel. I think this is actually all of them. Yeah, I think this is actually all of them. There is a document here, sorry for the flashbang, that has them broken down into lists for each of these. So you can just scroll through this list if you want to find a specific one. So we can find the large cluster jewel. Hopefully this is not too hard to find. Fire. There's 43 entries. No! It's going to be a little bit annoying to find through here. But once you figure out what notables it is you want, you can also just have a bit of a browse through as well. Have a browse through. There's also a official forum post here where you can find some of these things. So let's say we want to say nearby enemies have fire exposure. I don't know if this is on this one, but we can say Master of Fire. This might be on a different cluster jewel. We can go add stat filter, Master of Fire, and it does support these. As long as there's one listed on trade at least, it'll come up. One added passive skill is Master of Fire. We'll see if this actually is available on here at all. Yeah, this is on this one. Cool. So we can add, if you want to list out all 3 notables you want to try and get, or just 2 main notables you're going for, you can search for those. So we can see there's a Master of Fire one here with some other stuff on it that's not particularly good for 5 chaos. So you can search for specific ones quite easily like that, as long as you know which notables you're looking for. And then the other thing is that don't be afraid to craft these yourself. They're actually really easy to craft. The list of notables is not particularly long. And if you want to go for a specific one, alt, like transmute, alt, augmentation, regaling is not bad. That'll give you 3 affixes. They can have a maximum of 4 affixes. The 4th affix is pretty impactful in a lot of cases. So that does promote the idea of doing like scour alks or chaos spamming. Eventually, once you get like higher item level ones, you're trying to make a really good one, you're probably gonna chaos spam. You can also use fossils. Haven't really explored the full extent of how helpful that'll be yet, but chaos spamming will be particularly viable, and I've done a little bit of that, but I'm holding off on higher item level ones to do that. But for now, to craft like the ones that I'm using, I've crafted myself, right? And these are really good. So I've got Supercharge, which is lightning damage is lucky, and blind nearby enemies on using an elemental skill, which is amazing on my build. And then Grand Design for an additional brand. This node is excellent. So if I want to try and make a better one here, like this one, for example, I could try and alt spam for this and go for like this one was alt spammed, right? This is an alt spam regal. So I just went until I got Supercharge plus something else decent, and then I regaled it and probably got the jewel socket in that case. So that's really quite good. So for example, I've got a brand skill one here with max 4 passives. I can transmute this and it'll actually just show what the nodes do as well up the top there. So you can see just next to it, Remarkable, cast an additional brand. That one's pretty good. I particularly want to get the notable, this one here, Grand Design is really good. It's a little bit more rare, but I can basically augment and alt until I get something like that. And then hopefully like regal a nice one. We can skip over these ones. We've got Remarkable in a jewel socket. That's not bad. Brand Loyalty in a jewel socket. Remarkable in a jewel socket. You'll see a lot of what you're looking for a lot of the time. We've got a jewel socket we can augment. We can do a little bit of extra chaosing, a little bit of extra alting here. The Remarkable, we're seeing a lot of the Remarkable ones. That one's pretty, that one seems to be pretty common generally. Brand Loyalty, Remarkable. Holy Conquest, Brand Loyalty, jewel sockets we can augment to try and get the extra one again. Grand Design, there we go. So that was in like 10 alts. I got the one that I was looking for. That's really not hard. We augment the jewel socket and then we regal, hoping for something good. We got, in this case, Holy Conquest, movement speed, damage with brand skills, and activation frequency is actually quite good. So this actually is probably an upgrade from my current one because my current one just has 2% increased damage on the minor node, which is literally just 2% increased damage because I'm getting one of them. So that's a pretty big upgrade right there because I just got an extra notable that I didn't have. So I can take this one out. And I can like recraft this one later, try and make another good one. See if I get something good. And now we've got Holy Conquest as well for an extra point. So that's pretty good. And I'll get an extra point from somewhere and get that small jewel socket as well and resocket my jewel here. But easy. So that's kind of just like showing live how easy it is to craft these and upgrade and make really banging jewels with great clusters. Because that stuff's pretty fantastic. I like that. 10% activation frequency is quite nice. So if you have any questions or things you've learned from your own experimentation with the cluster jewels, let me know in the comments below. But I definitely encourage you to get in, do a little bit of crafting with them. They're quite common, as it turns out. I was expecting them to be really rare, but they seem to be quite common. So even playing around with these in Solar Self-Found seems quite viable. And even some of the large ones that are really common and really good, like the physical one, for example. If you're playing like a Gladiator Bleed Explosion build, you can get some really meaty stuff on the percentage physical increased damage one. Is really good. So definitely give it a go. I finished recording my video and I just remembered there's one other thing that I did want to show. that's really good to know with these cluster jewels is you can do the 5-for-1 vendor recipe with them, which if you're not familiar, you take 5 items of the same rarity and you can re-roll them by selling 5-for-1. So we just have a mixture of like less valuable ones here, mana evasion, lightning res, things like that. And you'll actually get a random enchant and passive number back. So if you got like a bunch of large jewels that aren't good or a bunch of small jewels that aren't life ones that you want, then you can re-roll them by doing this. So we get a little mystery box and we don't know what it is until we actually accept it. And we got 3 passives cold resist, which in this case is not very good, but you could well turn bad cluster jewels into good ones. And it does re-roll them as well. So you kind of get like a free chaos out of it as well. So you get another rare back there that you can identify and maybe it's good if you use like 5 rares like that. So that's a helpful thing to know as well, especially for Solar Self-Found if you're trying to get a specific cluster jewel type enchant. Anyway, folks, that is going to be it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thank you very much for watching.